Hey there, duelists. Welcome back to Team APS Plus. Today we're going to be delving into Konami's newest concoction of power creep for the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Because another new set has passed, which means that we have to get even stronger and more powerful cards. So, you guys might be thinking that the new version of power creep for, this week is something along the lines of like a monster that's even stronger or something that can negate even more, but actually it's in the form of hand traps that are archetype built in and also make going second even easier. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Okay, so first, tier elements haveness. Now you guys already know that tier elements are, the best deck right now. That's not really, up for debate. But I want to specifically zoom in just on like how this one card works and how you'll also see a trend, spoiler for some other cards up here, of these sorts of cards showing up in Yu-Gi-Oh! So when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, quick effect, you can special summon this card from your hand, and if you do, send the top three cards of your deck to the graveyard. So what does this mean exactly? Well, you might be thinking, that's not so bad, right? It's not like Ash Blossom or, Effect Veiler or Imperm where it's like negating your opponent's stuff, and it also isn't even like a D-Shifter or a Draw and Lockbird where it can completely shut their turn down. No, this is actually something a little bit more sinister in its own way. So what I mean by that is, this card gets your engine started for you. This card is a Tearlaments card. So whereas cards like Ash Blossom and Imperm or Veiler or whatever are just sort of generic monsters, they can end up wherever, or generic cards, I guess in the case of Imperm. Havness is a Tearlaments monster. That means it's a dark, aqua, and all that stuff, and all the fun things that come with that. And that means it's searchable. And when your opponent's going first and you're going second, using this, it's very easy to do. Your opponent just has to activate a monster effect in the field because, I mean, it's not like they wouldn't be doing that. And you get to summon this, mill 3, and as we all know with the Tearlaments engine, milling 3 is a great thing because all you need to do is mill pretty much any other Tearlaments cards and other just useful things, and poof, they get their graveyard effects, which all of them pretty much have the same graveyard effect of if it's sent to the graveyard by a card effect, this is a card effect by the way, you get to summon a fusion monster by placing the materials on it on the bottom of your deck from hand, field, and grave. So she summons, she mills, you just have to hit another tier card, and then suddenly she can be material for that tier card's effect alongside itself, and you get to actually start playing in your opponent's first turn, which is pretty wild because it can even be done at a period in time where your opponent oftentimes can't, respond to it. If they just are doing their normal summon, like they normal summon their Stratos and they use its effect to search, they don't even have like negations or anything set up yet, and so this card already has a use. Now, I'm not saying that in a vacuum this is just the worst thing in the world. I mean, like, we've had cards that, can like summon themselves in the opponent's turn before. That's where something like Gizmek Orochi comes in, right? You can summon it in your opponent's turn. This has existed for a while. It's not seen as too bad, but the fact that this is archetype specific is like really crazy. It's great that not loads of decks can necessarily use this easily, but the fact that it belongs to an archetype gives it a lot more synergy than a generic hand trap would have. Let's continue though. So next we've got Bestial Magnamut. This one is actually a super rare card, but it's like going for 10 bucks or so right now, which is pretty wild. Anyways, you can target a light or dark monster in either GY. Banish it, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. That doesn't seem so bad, right? That's like a Chaos Sorcerer type of effect, whatever. You just banish a card and you summon it. This is a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. So, right off the bat, we can see where the problems begin here because your opponent's definitely going to control a monster if they're going first and you're going second. So you can just use this in your opponent's turn to summon itself. And also, target a light or dark monster in either grave to banish it. That's how you summon the card. So then, you might be thinking, well, you won't be able to summon this because you won't have a light or dark monster in your graveyard if you're the person who's going second, right? Not exactly. This can banish from either graveyard. So as long as your opponent has any light or dark monster in their grave, and we know those aren't the most common attributes in the game or anything, then you can use Bestial Magnamut in your opponent's turn and disrupt them in the process because you get to banish a card from their grave as a quick effect and summon itself in the process. So this could actually disrupt a play. It summoned itself. He's beefy. That's great. And now also, during the end phase of the turn that he got special summoned, you get to add any dragon monster from your deck to your hand. So in summoning this, you can disrupt your opponent, you can put something on board, and that's all good and well, but it also starts your engine off before your turn even begins. And that's really interesting to me. That's very new for Yu-Gi-Oh! I think it's a little bit insane, but yeah. So that's kind of where we are, and that's kind of part of the reason why Bestial is so easy to tech into other decks. I mean, there's other Bestial monsters, all the basic ones, like Drua's Worm, for instance, I also have him pulled up, do have that same summoning effect where they can summon themselves as a quick effect if your opponent controls a monster. And in this one, actually, if this card gets sent from the field to the graveyard, sent from the field to the graveyard, not destroyed, not destroyed in battle, not like sent by a card effect, just sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target a special summon monster your opponent controls and send it to the graveyard. Not destroy it, just send it to the graveyard. And so that actually makes this a really great card for when you have to go second, because it starts off your turn with a monster on the field that sort of functions a lot like a Dino Wrestler Pancratops sort of removal-esque thing, where it's very easy to just kind of get this guy in the grave and then remove a card from the field. So it's sort of like a board breaker. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't dislike the Bestial monsters. I think that they're very cool. But this trend is a little worrying because it's just sort of like, okay, monsters that are just hand traps in an archetype is a bit much. Now, I did bring up Tri-Brigade Mercurier here, so we could talk a little bit about the whole idea of like a monster that's a hand trap and is part of an archetype. Tri-Brigade Mercurier is already kind of annoying in its own way, but it's not as bad as these new cards because, well, it's still kind of a thing where like you have to have a certain monster in the field, and it functions about like another hand trap would, where it can like discard itself to destroy something, but it doesn't exactly get your engine going or anything. Yeah, it has a sort of neat effect when it's like banished, but you're not going to oftentimes be able to do any of this stuff if you're going second, like in your opponent's first turn. So while this is a strong card, it's not as wild as these new cards are. It's just kind of an interesting sort of take on power creep by Konami. Now, while we're speaking about hand traps, I figure we might as well just bring up one of the other new cool cards these days, and that's Kastra Fenrir. So if you control no monsters, you can special summon this card from your hand. Now, at least this isn't a quick effect, thank goodness. But this card says, during your main phase, you can add a Kastra monster from your deck to your hand. It doesn't even exclude itself, so Kastra Fenrir can search for Kastra Fenrir. Shocker. All right, next, when it declares an attack, or if your opponent activates a monster effect, why do I have to have both as stipulations? Jesus Christ. You can target a face-up monster your opponent controls and banish it face down. So yeah, this is largely seen as better than Dino Racer Pancratops, partly because it's at 3, whereas Pancratops is at 1, but also because it can search itself, so you have another copy to use in a future turn, and also because you... This is so weird to me. They just make this monster that can just summon itself, and if your opponent tries to kind of interact with its search effect, like if they try to use, Effect Veiler on that, or, Ash Blossom on that, then it's able to actually chain and like banish an opponent's card. It's just kind of wild to me. Also, it stays on the field in that sort of exchange, so unlike Pancratops, it's not even leaving, it's just getting rid of a card. Banished face down, my ad. So yeah, this card's very strong. I know a lot of people are using it as a staple. I just find that this new type of like power creep, it's different and it's kind of unique, and it sort of seems like it's based around just the idea of making decks that have to go second or be stronger, or maybe more specifically, it's making decks that could already be perfectly fine going first even better going second, because they get these hand traps that kind of get their own engine moving, so they don't have to waste their time with lowly peasantry cards like, Ash Blossom or Veiler. Why not just use your own hand traps that can interact with your opponent and also get your engine started, all kind of in the same play. So, yeah, that's basically what I wanted to talk about today. Am I complaining again as always? That's right. That's pretty much what you came here for. That's the sales pitch here. What do you guys think of this new sort of power creep, this new strong thing that conveniently only the best decks are really able to have access to? You feel like it's good, bad, maybe it's not that big of a deal, maybe I'm just whining for no good reason. Who knows? All right, anyways, let me know down in the comments exactly how you feel about such strong new cards, and I'm sure there's just more on the horizon. Yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Oh, wait. Actually, I'm doing this on the computer. I can turn it off this way. Fast turn.